Yeah, so we're watching the UFC last night. The main event between Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. Let me see if I can get this to stop shaking like that. And obviously, the whole eye poke thing. The open finger gloves has been an ongoing issue for the UFC since, literally as long as I can remember. I think it's become worse recently because we've had quite a few, high-level fights. I'm talking about main events that have ended prematurely without a definitive outcome because of horrible, nasty eye pokes, right? And it's something that the UFC seems to not be able to get their hand around. And, they tried switching to this different style of glove. They stayed with that for a little bit, and then before you know it, I guess some of the fighters started complaining, saying that it was difficult from a grappling perspective to open your hands, gain wrist control. Obviously when you're grappling, you need to be able to open your hands, for control purposes and all the rest of it. So, for the striker, gloves that push your fingers closed automatically, not a big deal. You need to have your fist closed anyway when you're striking, right? But for the grappler, that could be a major disadvantage if you have gloves that work against you when you try to open up your hands. That could mean the difference between whether you're able to defend a choke or not if you can't open your hands, right? But I heard, Herb Dean, which obviously I'm not shitting on Herb Dean. He's obviously one of the best refs in the UFC, and he's been a ref for the UFC for ages, probably longer than a lot of you have been born, or been alive, rather. Herb Dean's been a ref for the UFC, and I only say you guys because I'm 48, so I know for a fact he hadn't, some of you guys may have been born after the UFC actually started. I was a 17-year-old kid back in 1993 when the UFC first came out, so I'm an old guy. Anyway, I digress. There had already been 2 fouls committed at the time. 3. There were 2 nut shots, and there was also an inadvertent eye poke, all committed by none other than Roman Dolidze at that time. Well, I don't remember what round it happened in, but they get into the fight, and an eye poke happens, which I just want to say, there's so many freaking fouls these days. And my son and I were watching the UFC last night, and we're like, geez, man, just, stop fouling each other. Let's just we want to watch the fights, It's really annoying that all the fouls are happening. But the eye pokes, this is something that wouldn't happen if they could figure out a way or some sort of glove to fix the problem, which I understand it has to be a difficult problem to fix because it's called MMA, mixed martial arts, which means you have strikers and the striking aspect of the sport, and you have grappling and the grappling aspect of the sport, right? That's where the problem comes in. You can't throw people in there in boxing gloves and, gloves that go over the whole fingers, because then what? People can't grab. People can't jockey for position properly in grappling exchanges. So that's why they're having all the trouble they're having. But the point I'm getting at is they need to continue. They need to start taking points. Because if they don't start taking points and they don't cease with just the stern warnings, then this problem is going to just continue to go south, because the guys are not going to practice when they're in camp, when they're with their coaches. Otherwise, they're not going to practice keeping their hands like this or like this, right? If they're not getting points taken away, if there's not some sort of consequence that is affecting the outcome of the fight in a negative way for them, they're not going to start correcting this, right? And I heard Herb Dean say last night, and this was after there had already been like 2 nut shots and an eye poke. The eye poke happens. He goes over to Dolidze, and you could hear it plain as day. He said on national television on ESPN, he says plain as day, this is the second second warning about the eye pokes, okay? Now, you got to keep your hands like this or like this. And if I see you doing your hands like this again, we're going to have to talk about that. I'm like, what? Wait. We're going to have to talk about it. You're talking about it now. You're talking about it now. And you've already talked to other fighters tonight. I understand that's a separate fight, but you're always talking about it. We're always talking about it. What do you mean we're going to have to talk about it? This is the second time you've had to warn him? You know, plus the 2 nut shots, which I know that's a separate thing. Separate infraction. I get that. But what do you mean if I see your hands like this again, we're going to have to talk about it? Now, I know, you know, people are going to come after me. They're going to be like, oh, you're mincing his words. You're taking his words out of context. What he probably meant was that if you do this again, or if I see you with your hands like this again, I'm going to take a point next time. But that's not what he said. He didn't say that. His exact wording was, if I see your hands like this again, we're going to have to talk about that. We're talking about it now, dude. What you need to say to put these fighters on notice that if you don't start poking and gouging people's eyeballs out, that I'm going to start taking a point away from you, and it could negatively impact your ability to win the freaking fight. If you don't start letting people know that, then they're going to continue to eye poke one another. Herb Dean and Dana White and the UFC and whoever else needs to hear me saying this. Okay? And it's just something that the fighters need to hear this. That Roman Dolidze in that moment did not need to hear that if I see your hands like this again, we're going to have to talk about that. No, he had already fouled him 3 times, 2 nut shots. And I may be getting that wrong. If I'm getting it wrong, sorry. I know it was at least the 3rd infraction. There was at least 1 nut shot and 1 previous eye poke before this second eye poke happened, right? Second eye poke happens. He's warning him again. He's not taking a point. He's warning him again. Why, bro? Why? Don't mince your words. Make it clear to these fighters what's going to happen. If they do it one time, fine. I think we can all agree. Shit happens. Accidents happen. I'm sure he wasn't purposely trying to poke Marvin Vettori in the eye. I think we can all agree on that. Happens one time, fine. Warn him. Say, hey, keep your hands like this. Keep your fingers like this. Don't do this. You could get another eye poke, because if you get another eye poke and I have to talk to you again a second time about it, you're going to lose a point. I am going to be forced, whether it was accidental or not on your part, I'm going to be forced, okay, to take a point from you. And guess what? If it happens again, that's Roman Dolidze's fault. If he loses a point and then that ends up affecting the outcome of the fight, you gotta start putting this in the hands of the fighters, no pun intended, but you gotta start putting it in the hands of the fighters, or this problem is not going to change. You already got cyclopses like Michael Bisping walking around. Poor guy's already lost an eye. I know that was probably, not even a eye poke. It was probably from a punch. But either way, when are we going to get to a point where first time's a warning, second time, you're getting a freaking point taken away? That's it. No questions asked. There has to be an immediate and relevant and felt consequence for this. I understand it's an accident. It's not about being mad at the person and, I'm going to take my anger out on you by taking away a point. No, it has nothing to do with feelings. But you only have 2 eyes, bro. And if you lose an eye because someone goes knuckle deep in your eye socket, you know, these guys, it could affect their lives. It could affect their careers. It could affect their ability to ever be able to get into that octagon again. I mean, Michael Bisping pretty much retired. You know, I mean, I know he's getting older, and he had, fortunately for him, he was a guy who had achieved everything he really needed to achieve anyway, so he was okay with retiring. And he pretty much retired because he was ready to retire. But the fact that he only had 1 eye and kept having to sneak by the athletic commission that he could only see out of 1 eye, I'm sure that didn't help. I'm sure that didn't hurt his decision to freaking retire. I don't know, man. That just blew my mind last night when I heard Herb Dean say, listen, I've already warned you about the eye pokes. You know, if I see you doing this again, we're going to have to talk about that. No, Herb. No. No. You're not going to have to talk about it. Say to him, tell them, you've been warned once. If I see your hands like this again, and if you poke, no, let me back up. Not if I see your hands like this, because putting your hands in this position in and of itself is not a foul. Okay? It's not a foul until the extended fingers poke somebody in the eye. The whole fact that they don't want them to extend their fingers like this is just a play to try to prevent it from happening so recurrently and so often, right? That in and of itself, keeping your hands in this way, that's not the foul. The foul is if you poke them, you know? But what he needs to say is, keep your hands like this. Keep your hands either bent or like this. If I see you doing this, I will have to warn you again. That's fair. But what he needs to say also in conjunction with that is, and if this causes, if the eye poke happens again, bro, you're getting a point taken away. He needs to be letting the fighters know this in real time when this stuff happens, so that the fighters understand they ain't playing no shit. And whether I do it purposely or not, maybe they'll finally start training like this or like this, as opposed to measuring with their hands straight out in front of them with their fingers pointed directly at their opponent's eyeballs. Just maybe. You gotta start putting them on notice, bro. Or this is never gonna, and never mind the fact that, you know, people's eyes are in danger or in jeopardy. Never mind that. Think about the fans of the sport and how many times we've got shit on and paid for an $80 pay-per-view that didn't last past the second round because somebody got knuckle deep poked in the eyeball. Bilal Muhammad, Leon Edwards. More recent example, Henry Cejudo. I mean, that was Song Yadong. That was a massive fight. Both of those were big fights. People take their time and money and put it into the sport to have a main event chopped in half, literally, because somebody goes knuckle deep in people's eyeballs. How are you going to change it? The only way to change it is for there to be a relevant consequence. You have to start taking points. So it's not, if this happens again, we're going to have to talk about that. No, you're talking about it now, and you've already warned them once. If it happens again and they poke them again, you poke them again, whether they meant to or not, you get a point taken. And I guarantee you, when that happens and that starts being implemented, these fighters and their coaches will start drilling, doing it a different way. And when they start drilling, doing it a different way and holding their hands in a different way, fighting, training in a different way, that's when the instances of eye pokes will start decreasing. And people will not be on the chopping block, risking losing eyes in the octagon so badly. And the fans will be happy because we'll be getting what we fucking paid for. A full event that hasn't been cut short or chopped in half because somebody's going knuckle deep in someone else's eye. I've had it, dude. I've had it. I've been watching the UFC too long. I've given them too much of my money for this shit to continue happening. I mean, luckily last night wasn't one that was horrible. The event was able to keep going. But how many freaking times is this got to happen before a change is going to be made? I'm done. I'm done. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. What's the answer here? What's the answer? I hate to complain without having an answer, but that's what I'm doing. I don't have an answer. Maybe you guys do. Tell me what you think needs to be done in this situation. Alright guys, I'm going to bounce. Subscribe to the channel if you would like the video, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching.